Penelope sat alone in the quiet room, the soft light of the afternoon filtering through the window. The fabric she was weaving hung loosely in her hands, each stitch even, each thread connecting like the peaceful days before the war began. She felt the stillness around her, as if time itself had paused in this room, leaving behind all the unfinished memories and unspoken hopes. Day after day, month after month, she sat there, continuing to weave each thread as a way to cope with the emptiness, the solitude, and the infinite worry. Her eyes, though tired, never stopped searching, as if hoping something would change. A knock at the door, the familiar silhouette of someone returning. But no, nothing changed. Day after day, month after month. Still no news from him, Penelope thought to herself, each word falling in her heart like raindrops on dry ground. It's just me and Telemachus left. Will he come back? Does he still remember me? She couldn't bring herself to consider that Odysseus might never return. His image still lived vividly in her heart, as strong as it had ever been. Yet, the long years without any news made that hope slowly fade away. Both she and her son had to live with fear, waiting without knowing if that day would ever come. Penelope gently ran her fingers across the fabric, her delicate fingers trembling as though feeling something invisible. Her even stitches followed one another as she tried to hold everything in her life together. But in her mind, chaos was brewing. She remembered the last day before Odysseus set off for war. It was a rainy day, cold winds blowing, and an unease hung in the air. Odysseus, the husband she loved, stood at the door, preparing to leave for the battlefield. Penelope could clearly see the fear in his eyes, the worry about the long war ahead. But she knew he couldn't stay. It was his duty, his responsibility to his homeland and his family. She could only send him off, promising him she would wait for his return. "I will wait for you, Odysseus," Penelope had said, her eyes full of tears. "Every day, every night, I will wait for you. No matter how many years pass, I will wait for you to come back." Odysseus had nodded, taking her hand one last time before turning to leave. "I will return, Penelope," he promised. But in her eyes, Penelope felt a sense of unease, a fear she couldn't put into words. Would he really come back? Now, as she sat here, in this quiet room, those memories flooded her mind. She remembered the sound of his footsteps, his laughter, the times they shared sunsets together by the sea. Those happy days now seemed like a distant dream, a part of her memory she didn't want to forget. But the truth was, she still faced the loneliness every day. Telemachus, her only son, had grown up in the shadow of his absent father. The boy knew little of his father except the stories Penelope told him about the hero Odysseus she had always admired. Penelope wondered if Telemachus could ever understand the sacrifice she had endured, if he could feel the pain of a mother and a wife waiting for someone who might never return. Penelope looked down at the fabric she was weaving, each stitch like a piece of an incomplete picture. Every day she tried to finish her work, but in her heart she couldn't stop worrying about the future. Could she keep living in this waiting? Could Odysseus really return as he had promised? She sighed and bent down to continue her work. Her hands moved quickly, but in her head there were only questions. Questions with no answers, but ones that still circled around her mind. Perhaps all she could do now was wait for a miracle, for some change.
Telemachus wasn't a weak child. He had grown up strong, able to take care of himself and his mother. But each time she looked into his eyes, Penelope felt a deep sadness. Would Telemachus ever meet his father? Would he ever understand the sacrifice she and his father had made? Penelope couldn't answer those questions, but she knew one thing: she would never give up hope. With each passing day, though the waiting seemed endless, she held on to the belief that one day Odysseus would return. One day, their family would be reunited, and all the pain, all the sorrow would be erased. Her story with Odysseus wasn't over, even though so many years had passed. Her story was one of love, sacrifice, and belief in a brighter tomorrow. In her darkest moments, Penelope still held on to hope, and still patiently waited. The sunlight gleamed through the wide windows of their house. The air inside was filled with the sounds of laughter, conversations, and the music of instruments, mingling with the smell of food coming from the feast. A lively celebration was taking place in a warm atmosphere, where friends, family, and acquaintances were gathering together, enjoying the happiness that nothing seemed capable of breaking. It was a picture of harmony, love, and hope. Penelope stood in the corner of the room, looking around, watching all the people laughing and talking. However, her gaze couldn't hide a fleeting sadness. Although she participated in the joy of everyone, the thoughts in her mind never ceased to stir. She knew that today wasn't just any occasion. It was a farewell feast before the war began, a celebration marking the departure of her beloved husband. Odysseus stood in the center of the room, talking to a group of friends. Everyone around was excited and eager about the upcoming campaign, about the victories they hoped to achieve. Laughter and stories of adventures echoed through the space, but Odysseus couldn't help but feel the gaze of Penelope, who was standing by, quietly watching him. A brief silence passed when their eyes met. Odysseus moved closer to Penelope, his hands reaching out, gently taking hers. His eyes were full of pride and determination, but there was also tenderness for his wife. Penelope, though smiling at everyone, couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. Odysseus, with a confident and assured voice: "I will win, Penelope. I will return and bring glory to us. We will live in happiness. No one will stop us." Penelope, smiling but with concern in her eyes: "I hope so, but can it really be? Will you ever return? Will you have the strength to overcome all the trials? You will face many things we never imagined." Odysseus, holding her hand firmly, pulling her close, looking into her eyes: "I will return, even if I have to face the whole world. You are the only reason I fight. You and our son, Telemachus. Nothing can stop me. I promise I will come back to you." Penelope looked up at her husband, her eyes full of love, but also containing an indescribable fear. She could feel the strength in Odysseus' voice, but her heart still couldn't escape the feeling of uncertainty. Each word he spoke was a comfort, but it was also a deep-seated fear in her heart, for she couldn't know what the future held. Penelope, softly, smiling but worried: "You've promised many times before, but this time is different. This war is unlike any we've seen, Odysseus. You will face enemies we have never imagined. Do you have the strength to overcome it all?" Odysseus, with determination: "I have the strength, Penelope. I will overcome all trials. As long as you trust me, everything will be fine." Penelope looked at her husband, seeing in his eyes a resolve that couldn't be shaken, but she still couldn't stop thinking about what could happen. She gently reached up to caress Odysseus' cheek, letting out a soft sigh. "Penelope," quietly, gently, "I just hope you'll come back to us. I will wait for you, Odysseus. Every day, every night."